Thank you. Thank you very much, Ray. So, TLDR, too long, didn't read. I just wanted to explain that to those of us who maybe aren't as young as some people here who would probably know what that means in terms of millennial speak. We want to tell you a story about how you can improve the communication of insights internally to your stakeholders. I'm Lucy Davison. So the experiment started when I met with a colleague of Lauren's, Begonia, and she told me about her biggest challenge. And the big challenge wasn't getting data, doing analysis, reporting, doing presentations, but getting wider impact and influence for her team for their work. In fact, what she said to me was, right now, they never ever read the email. The stuff they're sharing is simply not cutting through. So we devised an experiment, and we had two clear aims for this. One of which was to understand what types of insight communications would have the most resonance and impact with the internal audience at Coca-Cola in Western Europe. And the second one was to learn how to best reach and influence that audience in the longer term. So not a flash in the pan, but to work out what we should do long term to make change. So first of all, we need to understand who the audience is, and Laurel's going to explain that to us.
So we have a huge audience to contend with. So we're dealing in Western Europe, which is across 14 different countries. So the easiest thing to do was try and split our audience and then have a focus group. So we will start with Tier A, which is the initial group of stakeholders. So these are the people commissioning the projects. They're really engaged with the results. They need about 80% of the information. And then to skip to the final tier is C. These are the seniors. So they get the information. They only need a small amount, and Begonia communicates this with them. And then our problem group is Group B. So you'll hear us speak about Group B throughout the presentation. This is about 400 individuals across 15 departments and across 14 countries. So they need about 25% of the information. We really need to get them engaged. This stakeholder group can vary depending on which project it is that we're showcasing. So we also need to overcome that. So the B group is our target group.
Okay. So to understand the real depth of the problem to start with, we did some research. And the first thing we did was a review of all the existing materials, emails and presentations and reports that the K&I team in Western Europe were using. So we looked at the presentations, we looked at how they were being communicated, how they were being shared, and what kind of responses they were getting, the subject lines for the emails. We then did a survey with the Knowledge and Insights team to try and understand how they were sharing their material and what they thought was good and what they wanted to do. And we also did a survey with those B group stakeholders, the ones who were the least engaged and who we really needed to have impact with, to find out what they knew about what K&I was doing, if anything, and how they wanted to be communicated with. And finally, Lauren followed up with qualitative interviews with those B group stakeholders to get a really in-depth view and understanding of their communication needs. So what did we find?
So unfortunately, not unlike many insights groups, when I asked the stakeholders, do you know what's going on in our projects? Do you know what we're doing? They said, no, not really. But it was worse than that. What they actually said was they don't know what's going on in another department, in another market, some other food chain. Fact is, they really don't care. If it doesn't have direct impact on their job, then they're not bothered at all. So we've got a really high mountain to climb to actually get these people to be engaged. And we then looked at summarising what we felt were these stated barriers. And we felt they were pretty consistent for all organisations, and everybody comes up with these excuses and reasons for why they can't improve their communication. So they don't have enough time, they have a lack of support and resources internally. There are existing ways of doing things that people are very comfortable with, and they don't feel any need to change. So, I mean, it's not a big problem for Coca-Cola, and it's not different for anybody else. It's the same everywhere, that people will always have a state of inertia, and they will
refuse to change unless they're really, really supported and driven to it. So what do we do for the experiment? We did 3 things. And the first thing we needed to do was to pick 3 projects that we could use to experiment.
So we chose 3 very different projects. As I said before, the B group, different things will appeal to them. So we've got flavour extensions, which was basically just choosing which new flavour was going to be launched for one of our brands. Recycling advertising concepts, which is what it says on the tin, testing different concepts. And experiential marketing analysis, which was looking at the ROI on different forms of experiential marketing. So 3 very different in that the flavours extensions is something that is quite systematic. It can be boring to some people, but it's something that has to be done. The recycling concept is something that affects people on a more personal level. It's something that touches everyone. And the third project is something more financial and more analysis based.
So we took those 3 projects and we decided that we needed to focus on treating each project, the communication around each project, as like a mini campaign. And the most important thing we needed to do was identify the key overriding message for each of those projects. Ultimately, what we were trying to do was create a hook. And when we were thinking about this, we did some quite extensive research. We realized that people do judge a book by its cover, and the title of a book is extremely important as to whether we pick it up and read it. And that is exactly the same as the way we need to think about our research report. So instead of putting Q1 tracking study, France, Germany, Spain in your subject line, you need to be putting something much more interesting and engaging, which is reaching out to your audience. And we also looked at some research, which was into 70,000 headlines used by global news agencies over an 8-month period. And they had done analysis which found 5 different types of the most effective headlines. And we used these 5 different types to create the subject lines and the headlines for our copy and content. So I'm just going to take you through some of those examples here. The first good way of writing a subject line is surprise. So when we were doing the recycling research, one of the participants said that they thought that Coke should collaborate with a competitor. So that's a bit of a surprise for people internally within Coca-Cola. The second way of doing it is by piquing people's curiosity. So here we're focusing on things that are new, hot news, new infographics, stuff you've never heard before, what's going on here. That was quite clear and straightforward. The next one, which is absolutely classic and people will recognize this, it is a question. People love a quiz. So if you want to get engagement, put a question in your subject line or in your headline. So which flavour helps the Germans unwind? What's the flavour of the month? People like to think they know the answers to these things. And then on the other hand, the other way of getting attention from your headline is to be very negative. I mean, we're all aware of the fact that in news outlets, the really negative headlines are the ones that people read most. So trying to switch that into our context, which citrus flavour is the least popular? Oh, another question. And then finally, the most effective way of getting engagement is to use numbers. And again, we're all used to seeing this kind of clickbait on the internet. 3 reasons to do this, 80% growth. So that's quite easy for us to translate into our headlines and our subject line. So we pulled all that together and created different headlines, which we then tested with our experiment. And then we created impactful materials about the 3 studies. And Lauren's going to take us through those.
So I'll just quickly run you through the 6 formats that we had. So we tested just plain text. So we just had a summary of each project with my details in there. So if people needed more information, that's how we could gauge the reaction to this email. And yes, we did test PowerPoint. So we have to test our most communicative form. Except the PowerPoints that we put in there weren't 50, 60 slides. We'd summarize them, so just the main content was in there. So it was between 5 and 8 slides. And then we had a link in the email to our internal sharing platform where you could have all the full documents. And we went more 2-dimensional. So we've got pictures, descriptions in a newsletter form. And we also had, we called it Naked Insights as a second hook after the subject line. And the infographic. So this is really short on text because it's just got the key facts in there. So it's great for the more number focused projects. And when you clicked on the relevant part of the infographic, it took you through to our internal sharing platform where you could get full details. Then more three-dimensional, we had videos. So we had animated videos that were created on a simple software that's on Apple Macs. And we just summarized the key results. They were no longer than 2 minutes, and they were hosted again on the platform. And then the video interviews. So as I said previously, we're across 14 different countries. So you don't always get to meet the person that's doing your research project. So these videos went down really well because it adds that personal touch and people get to have more communication with the team. And these were just a couple of minutes long, again, just summarizing the main results. So our results. So I can take you through our results if we begin with user logins.
Oh, hang on a minute, Lauren. We have a better way of doing this now. We know from our study that presenting a crammed PowerPoint chart is not the way to go to get engagement. In fact, we've created you a video of our results because we can't share with you any of the animated videos because obviously they're all confidential. But we have got this little animated video which is very similar to the ones that we created, which we're going to show to you now.
Qué guay.
So hopefully that gave you a good flavour of the sort of thing that we were doing. And overall, we tracked the responses to the communications, looking at how many people were logging on to the knowledge sharing platform. And overall, the one that drove the most traffic to the knowledge sharing platform was the newsletter. And after that, as Lauren said, the talking head videos went down very well because people loved being able to see the faces of the people who were involved and engaged with the research projects. And then we put the infographic third, and although this drove very little traffic to the knowledge sharing platform, we felt that was because the infographic itself had all the information anybody needed to know in one place, and they didn't really need to click on it and go and read a report. But we actually felt the infographic was very successful. In addition, when we asked people what they wanted in future, by far the most popular thing was an infographic. So it seemed to me that that was definitely the third of the winners. However, those three pieces of communication are only going to be of value if they're used within the context of very short, number-focused headlines. So the ones with numbers in definitely got the most interest. And the copy around these things need to be very, very short. So the titles, 3 to 8 words, the intro text of 25 to 40 words. And it's very, very hard to cut down that much, but it's incredibly important to do so. And finally, in the communication, there has to be a really clear call to action. So people need to understand why they're being sent this communication, what it's for, and what they need to do with it. And if you don't put that in, then it loses its impact. So what's COPE doing now then with this information?
So for us, it's to make sure that we apply these key learnings. So don't just do the study and move on. Make sure you really keep it in mind with every email that you send, and to brand ourselves. So the same way as our brand managers send emails about their brands, we want to, we've got our newsletter now, and we're we're creating a name for ourselves in the business. And then we want to have consistency with our agencies and with our results, our summaries, so that people can read them more easily. And the more concrete things, we've launched our newsletter. So it's a bi-monthly newsletter, which is getting great feedback. And then we're going to select 9 projects a year, 2 to get into infographics and 1/3 as talking heads. And on a broader level, so how you can apply this to your own agencies, I would say everybody needs to be motivated and behind it. So you need a dedicated client coordinator, which in this case was me, but it wouldn't have worked without the help of the whole team. So you need everyone to be behind it, and you need to have senior support to push it through. And I would definitely say use a separate communications agency, because we're all very tied to our results and our projects, and we get really into the data. So we need someone to come in and take a look and see what is really relevant to all of the wider stakeholders that only need perhaps 25% of the information.
And on a very specific level, I would say it's really important to make sure that it's simple. So you can do this using most of companies have existing tools and platforms. So for example, when we were doing the talking head videos, we just used the video conferencing service that Coca-Cola has internally anyway. And we just use that to do the recordings and the interviews. Make it really simple, really straightforward. Again, for the animated videos, we just use Keynote, which is a software that comes with most Apple Macs, and it's pretty straightforward to know how to use. We didn't need to get in external animators. We didn't try to make it a Hollywood production. And doing that meant that we were able to act very fast, but also keep the cost down and make it really easy to facilitate. So all that is really good, but fundamentally, there's one point that we wanted to leave everyone with, and it's actually you kind of can't choose not to do this. We've made great progress on storytelling, but if nobody's actually getting to read your stories, then it's a bit irrelevant. So we would argue that you need to make the choice to do this, and it's not nearly as hard or as difficult as people think it is. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lauren. That was absolutely fantastic and a useful piece of learning, I'm sure, for everybody. So I'm just going down to the control panel. We've got time for a question here. What was included on the knowledge sharing platform is the question we have.
So our platform includes all of our projects, really. So since I started last year, we've made it mandatory for everyone to have their projects on there. So it has hundreds and thousands of projects. Every project that's done by the team is uploaded on there, published, and so you can really access everything, all of our knowledge from there.
Super. Now, one of the things that was quite interesting is that you said that people most like infographic, and this kind of brings up a question. Is there a difference? If there is a difference between what people want and what works, what should you give them? And perhaps, Lucy, that's a kind of a general question. It's not really just a Coke question, because we see this all the time with dashboards and things. What people say they want isn't necessarily what works.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you need to take into account what works. And I think all communication should be this. So this is obviously the plan with what we're going to do. So we're doing a combination of head videos and infographics and the newsletter. So we know some things are more effective and people will click through. But on the other hand, if we know what they want and we give them what they want as well, then we're kind of integrating everything together so you can have a win-win. And I think you need to keep it varied. I think you just keep doing a newsletter every month. On the first of every month, it lands in your inbox. It'll get pretty boring pretty quickly.
Okay, now we were losing you very slightly there, Lucy.
Sorry.
It's all right, and we're nearly out of time, but there are a couple more questions. So, really helpful. Is the knowledge stored in PowerPoints? That's, I guess, a question for you, Lauren. When you're on the knowledge platform.
Yeah, so a lot of it is in PowerPoints. You can have all kinds of documents in there, but yeah. I'd say the majority is in PowerPoint, yes.
And the final one that we've got time for. What do you use to track the results of the different email versions? What sort of metrics?
So we work with Market Logic actually. So they helped us in this. So I uploaded to different spaces so I can track within different spaces in the site, and we just tracked on a user basis. So it was fairly detailed, and Market Logic were really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.